So today we're just going to have a little bit of a look at the information processing in sport, specifically the information processing model, how that applies to sport, and also when we get to class we'll be looking at some examples and trying to relate it back. So first of all, let's take a quick look at, what is information processing? So information processing models are descriptions of how the brain interprets and selects information to use. So you're looking at how exactly athletes interpret information, select information, and then how they choose to use that information. So in sport, these models help us to understand how athletes analyze games and select skills to execute. So really very simple. We're not going to go into a complex model, but very simple model. You have your input, your processing, output, and feedback. So input is the stimuli we attain from our surroundings. So everything that we get in from our surroundings during a game. So sight, sound, touch, everything like that. Our processing stage is the ability of the brain to process the input we obtain and select an appropriate response. So you get the information in, the brain processes that information and chooses what it wants to do with it. So for example, a player's free, so they'll choose to kick or pass to them. Output is the body's ability to execute that chosen action during the processing stage. So if I've chosen to kick to the free player, the output is actually having the ability to kick the ball and hit that free player up. And then the last stage is the feedback stage, which is the body then analyzes the outcome of the process and output for future reference. So the feedback stage is all about, okay, I did this from this stimuli. Did it work? Did it not work? What should we be doing next time? So input in a bit more depth. So sight, looking at position of opponents, teammates, field layout, speed of incoming players, the speed of the object, everything like that. Sound, so cheering crowds, players calling for the ball, opponents talking, coach yelling, instructions. Touch, so the feel of the ball, the weather conditions. So this is all the sort of input data that you receive while you're playing a game. For example, with the position of the opponents, you really have to, you're viewing the game or the field, and you got to be understanding, okay, is their opponents free? Are any of my teammates free? Where are the opponents? Am I free? All that sort of stuff is going to influence what sort of output you decide to do. For example, with the field layout as well, where you are is going to affect your output, because it may limit your decisions. Because if you're in the forward line of football, for example, you really got limited choices, in the sense that you're going to have to kick short most of the time, whereas from the back line you've got a lot more choices to make. Do you go short? Do you go long, sideways? So you've got a lot more sort of things to take into account. In terms of sound and cheering, so cheering, calling for the ball, opponents talking, all that sort of stuff. So your brain has to decide whether or not you want to use that. In my case, don't really need to, because I don't hear it anyway. So that's pretty handy. And obviously touch is the feel and everything related to touch, and whether that's going to have an input. So the processing part of the information processing model, that's all about the what, the where, when, and the why. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to do it? When will you do it? Why are you going to do that? So all the input comes in to your brain processes it all and has to make a decision based on that input as to whether they're going to kick the ball, hand pass the ball, where they're going to put it, why they're going to put it there. So obviously the more experience a player has, the more efficient they are at processing input and selecting the current output. So when we're talking about processing input, there's two key parts. So first of all, actually being able to pick up everything that's coming in quickly. So if we're talking about cricket, cricket players at an elite level can very quickly pick up where the ball's going to bounce, and then they play their shot. whereas an amateur player will take more time to pick up where the bowler's bowling, and therefore isn't as good. They're not going to play as good a shot. And the second part of the processing in the input is actually deciding, okay, so which input is relevant and which input isn't. So again, in say cricket or football or netball, if you've got the crowd yelling on the sideline, you really want to phase that noise out. You don't want it there. You want to be focusing on the teammates calling, the noises from the opposition, so you know where they are. So the processing is two parts. The next bit is the output. So output just covers the body's ability to execute that desired decision. So the more skilled an athlete, the better their output. So a player can make the right decisions but have a poor output, while other players may make the wrong decisions but have good output. So the difference between the two is, the processing is all about experience and in the mind, whereas your output is a lot more your ability to execute that skill. And the last part of the model is feedback. So that's all about the body giving yourself feedback for the next time. Did I choose the correct option? Did I execute my decision correctly? Should I have changed my decision? All these sort of questions come into the process subconsciously. So you don't know you're going through this process, but the brain always is. So how does this actually apply to sport? So players need to achieve three key things. First, their ability to process and select relevant input. So listening to calls but phasing out crowd noise. Then they need to achieve the ability to select the appropriate decision to make quickly from that input. So that's all experience related. And the last thing is they need to be able to execute the decision made, and that's skill related. So understanding the information processing model allows us to identify, which aspect of gameplay or which of these three aspects should an athlete be focusing on. So if they're getting the decisions right but they're not quite getting the skills, you need to be focusing on the skills. If the skills are there but they're not making the appropriate decisions, you need to do a lot of decision making sort of drills and games in order to get that up. If they're having trouble blocking out noises, for example, there's lots of sort of activities and things that athletes can do to improve that. So that's just a quick thing on information processing model. Really simple concept, and we'll be looking at this a little bit more in class.